Are you exhausted from working tirelessly without seeing the result you deserve? Have you found yourself questioning if there's a better way to secure your family's future? Guys, we've been there. Today we're going to share with you a powerful shortcut that will set your family up for life and help you build that lasting legacy. Okay, so let's start with a key insight from Daniel Priestley, the author of Oversubscribed and Key Persons of Influence. He makes this statement that is so super powerful to us, right? Income follow asset. Well, what does that mean, right? Simply put, those who own asset generate income. If you own properties, income follows that asset. If you own Airbnb, income follows that asset. If you're struggling to make income, it's likely because you lack income producing asset. Relying solely on your jobs means you're trading your precious time for a little bit of someone else's money. Okay, so our recommendation here is to focus on creating and acquiring income producing asset. There are many ways to acquire asset. Our bread and butter lies in multi-family apartments. Think anything 65 units and above. After successfully growing our multi-family portfolio from zero to over $300 million in just 5.5 years, we have never been so excited about this opportunity that is coming up. We've been looking for this opportunity. So, what else are we excited for? Well, we're super excited about this extremely niche trend that everyone is eager to hear, right? To get into the build to rent development. And we're speaking from experience here as we're currently in the process of building one.
So you may be wondering, what is build to rent, right? And what's the
Yep, so you may be wondering, right? What is build to rent?
Yeah, so build to rent is actually something that's a new phenomenon. Typically in the past, you've heard about building communities that are based on like build to sell, right? Like you have large communities, you go in, someone builds a property, and then you're able to just buy a single family home from that lot. That's a unique perspective that's shifting in the last couple years, and that's why build to rent is a new phenomenon in today's current market, and precisely why we're so excited that we're already doing our own development in. So first of all, let's get into what exactly is build to rent development and how you can set up your family for a lifetime success. So as mentioned earlier, the purpose of build to rent obviously is a rental community, unlike build to sell, right? So this characteristics includes things like single family dwellings or townhomes, or now like we've seen even multi-units like duplex, triplex, but built in a community setting, correct?
That's definitely true. And for us, we chose to build the single family townhomes.
Yeah, in this scenario that we're building right now, depending on the scenario, you may go from single family homes to townhomes. Like it depends on the flavor, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. The distinguishing factor, guys, for BTR is home ownership filled with professional management amenities tailored for renters that are on long-term contracts. These are people who crave that sense of home ownership and want that sort of privacy that you really don't get when you own or live in an apartment complex. We used to live in an apartment complex when we were growing up, and it was a chore, right? Like neighbor walking by, stomping their feet loudly, or you have an upstairs neighbors walking and you can hear them. You can hear their like parties at like 2 a.m.
Yeah, they seem to don't care about their neighbors.
Yeah, so like that was our experience growing up in Los Angeles in like I would classify that, Nan, what do you think? Like a C class asset at the time when we were growing up? C class with
I think it's like C minus.
What do you guys think if we had roaches on a regular basis and no one did anything about it? Do you think that was a C or would that be like a D? It was pretty rough.
It was rough.
It was rough. So the other part of this is that long-term stability is key to why people love BTR. Think about a steady stream of income. People who live in BTR communities tend to be longer term residents because once you move into your home, as you guys know, like it's very difficult for you to leave because now you've built a whole community, a family, people that you are familiar with in the bigger development altogether. Moreover, it's really for the investor side, it's really market resilient because rental demand often are stronger in economic downturns. Also, when you do build to rent communities, you also hedge against inflation. It's a tangible asset. That's like Nan said, right? It's income follows assets.
Who here loves
Income
producing asset, right? Again, for those of you who just joined, Daniel Priestley said income follows asset.
Yeah, so income follow assets means that you don't rely on you working long hours to trade a lot of your time for a little bit of someone else's money. By you actually separating that income from the asset, what we always talk about, right? You have to separate your income generation from your asset. You actually now have the ability to live a more fulfilled life because you're not trading that time off from someone else now.
Yep.
Furthermore, this actually is BTR is something that actually benefits people who want to build family and generational wealth because these assets are new development that you're building for us are
Have anybody know what is BTR? Give us a drop.
people just join. If you don't know what BTR is, let us know. We can recap that. BTR is build to rent. And so basically the reason that build to rent is such a unique characteristic is previously when we built up our $300 million multifamily portfolio, this was all on buying existing assets. The thing is, like, when you have an existing asset, you're constrained by someone else's development, what they thought, their development thesis, what they thought was the in trend thing that the renters are looking for at that point in time. However, in our community, we get to decide what makes sense for our residents, not today, but in 2 years. So we're really preemptively determining what are the cool things that we're gonna have, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. Versus having to buy an apartment that may have land risk constraints, that there's things that we really can't add value to it. People can say, "Hey, I can buy an apartment and add value by like doing renovations, painting the outside, maybe adding new sidings or something." But now, like that's pretty much the extent, right? You can't really go in and just like plop in like, "Oh, I'm gonna add these
Yes.
amenities or
So
that
the
amenities."
business plan for multifamily apartments is totally different
Mm.
than build to rent development, right? Because like Palm said, for multifamily, the existing building already exists. So you can only do so much. But with build to rent, you're literally
Blank
turning
canvas.
turning this piece of dirt into like
Income producing asset.
income producing asset and building this entire neighborhood like that, like one that we're building right now.
Yeah, and so inherently, you get to keep these properties longer term. For us as developers, the goal there's multiple exit strategies that comes with multifamily with BTR communities. Of course, if we wanted to stick with our bread and butter, sort of similar profile, okay, exit in 5 years. However, there are different scenarios where you can hold it longer, refinance multiple times because we have a brand new asset on our hands, right?
Or like in our case is individually deeded, meaning that we can actually sell off like
One home.
one single family townhome at a time, right? And that's what we love about build to rent
The
because
flexibility.
there's so many different exit strategy.
Yeah, it's just a very the exits are varied based on who's the buyer. There's isn't institutional investors who are now getting into BTR. If you guys Google people, people behind Amazon, people behind a whole bunch of big companies, their private equity firm or the firms that they invest money into are all jumping into BTR because this is an opportunity not to capture things that are already built and like fixed, but we get to start from the ground up and we get to actually get the lowest cost basis possible. What does cost basis mean? It means like instead of buying a building that's already built with filled with tenant, you're going to pay a premium for that.
Yep.
You're buying raw land. By buying raw land, that's basically the lowest cost basis you can ever have. And the only thing that you add on is pure cost of construction, pure cost of soft development, of leasing, of doing all the furnishing for clubhouse, etc. But you're not buying profit that's stacked on by other people already.
Yep. On top of that, when you're building the build to rent development, you're actually we actually think of what our end user, which is our tenant, our want, right? We're not just randomly like, hey, I just want this and that. We actually have a third party property management team,
Which we're gonna get into later on in the
yes,
later
who
on the
actually tell
presentation.
us what to do.
So, guys, going back to the generational wealth piece, it's really important as we grow our wealth. We're not thinking of wealth for ourselves only. We have to think about like the reason we all got into this isn't just to make money for ourselves. Everyone wants the successive generations to do better than us. And part of that is to set them up correctly. Nan talks about this all the time. Like, there's no one here who wants to build up wealth and then like let their family restart from the ground floor again, right?
Yeah.
Like, who here wants their kid to have that advantage of already the hard work that we've already worked so to get to the point? Like, most of us started from zero, right? We were down here. You built up your wealth. Why would you ever want your kids to have to start from zero again? There's no point to that. And
Yes, and we're not advocating like having like
Trust fund babies.
trust fund baby. Not at all, right? We're talking about giving them access and opportunities that we didn't have.
Yes, and so beyond this, BTR properties also allows for diversification and reducing of risk as well. It's really inherently set up so that you pass these projects on to successive generations. Now, let's talk a little bit about the growing demand for rental properties just in general, and then we'll dive into why BTR also is even a core focus of that. So there's a massive demographic shift happening in the United States. Millennials and Gen Zs are actually preferring renting over buying because they want that flexibility of lifestyle. And beyond the people who actually want the flexibility, the affordability gap between home ownership is at its all-time high today.
Yep.
Unfortunately, and because of the devaluation of the US dollars over the past 100 years being about 95% less than what it was worth 100 years ago, people cannot afford to have homes anymore.
Yep.
And by not having home, they're looking for that next alternative. Gen Z and millennials are saying, okay, if I can't afford a home, I don't want to live in an apartment. Like, what is my choice?
Yep.
Their next alternative, which is the one that makes the most sense, is actually to do a BTR community. So because these communities are really more suburbanized, they also have some in urban areas as well, but that drives demand because it gives them the lifestyle that they wanted. Again, home ownership prices, affordability crisis is there because home prices are so high.
Yes, and these people are looking to grow their family, so they're looking for amenities that apartment cannot have.
Yeah. Okay. So here's some statistics to back up what we're just talking about, right? Home demand versus home ownership. Guys, did you know that since 2004, we actually have a decline in home ownership by 69%? And actually, this trend is going to continue, meaning that home ownership is going to drop while renters are going to be on the rise. The development in BTR sector has grown so significantly that there's about 55,000 BTR units that were completed in 2023.
Wow,
At 29%.
Isn't that mind-blowing, guys?
Yeah, this is where like multifamily apartment was probably back in 2010. And we like to think of this as sort of like the startup phase. Who here wouldn't have wanted to be part of like Airbnb or Uber or like Google when they first started?
Yay, give us a hand thumbs up.
We're not saying that it's the same evaluation, but I read an article that one of the early investor in Google put in $200,000 and it became like $100 million or something.
Oh my God, let's just pause for a second.
Basically, like when you get to invest in something when it's in a startup phase, you have the runway for it to become something massive potentially, versus actually getting to an industry that may be a little bit more mature. You're not going to be able to take advantage of it as much as otherwise. Okay, so
okay, guys. So we often get asked this. Okay, so what's the major difference between build-to-rent developments and multifamily apartments?
So this is an important distinction because, like Nan said at the beginning, we both came into multifamily apartments as our bread and butter, and we'll continue to look for opportunistic purchases. But honestly, going forward with the ability to have this like once in a lifetime moment, it's like when people were like the PC was happening in the 80s when smartphone was happening in the early like 2010s. This is a moment for BTR. Like you can mark the calendar, come back to this date in 10 years and you'll be like, wow, I wish I had started in this.
And it totally makes sense, right, guys? We're like our basis cost is way cheaper, right? Our entry level, instead of having like, like the type of apartments we buy is like 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million dollars. Instead of having that kind of money, you're just buying land, which is way cheaper.
You know what? Like when you talk about that, so let me give you guys like more context to the flexibility of BTR. The development that we had was purchased about 3 years ago at about $2.5 million. As an aside, very interesting story. We purchased it from like a 90-something-year-old man, and we couldn't get the contract signed. Guess why? Because he was on his honeymoon. Yes,
Whoa.
A 90-plus-year-old man was on a honeymoon, and he said, "I'll take care of the paperwork when I come back. I'll be back in I think he said like 6 weeks." So during that whole time, we were like, he's 90-something and he's on his honeymoon. I'm like, please don't have a heart attack. Please don't have a heart attack. Don't go too wild. Because I was like, we want this property.
We need this property and we want it, right? I mean, think about it. Like, so not to say much about that specific project. It's like we bought it for just a couple million. But we're actually gonna turn it into a community, an entire neighborhood, and we're gonna exit at
Massive valuation. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So
High eight figures.
so
Let's just say that.
So okay, sorry, I lost my point when I was talking about the honeymoon thing. So basically, we bought the raw land, right? The great thing of BTR is the valuation successively increases every stage of development. So when we first bought the raw land, if you kept the land as dirt, you would make some money just holding on to it for the next couple years.
And I think that's the beautiful thing is that you can actually exit at any point.
Yeah. So
right?
so when we bought the land, we could have exited already because by the time before we even started the development, the value already doubled.
Yep.
So a little bit more, like a little bit more than doubled. Nothing done, right? But then when we started getting like permits, engineering plans approved, all those things adds more value to it. So today, like with that project specifically, we are already at the point where we're already begun horizontal. We're doing a lot of anything that's underground essentially on the project. What that means is this is now considered a developed property. It's not raw land anymore.
Yep.
That means that if someone wants to come in and say like, "Hey, I'm gonna take over from here. I'll do the construction for the actual building, vertical construction." We could exit.
That's kind of like similar to like wholesaling like single family home. You
Yeah.
can just wholesale, like just flip the land, like just wholesale the land, or you can just exit
You can
with
you
a
can
plan,
sell, I
with
would say
entitlement.
you can sell it at any stage. Entitlement would have been one of them, but we personally on that specific video we passed that point already. So okay,
And we don't want to sell it.
and we don't want to sell it.
We
no.
love it too much.
No. So welcome any offers. We'll consider if it makes sense. So okay, back to BTR versus multifamily. Some of the key distinctions is like that really single family home or townhome field. These have private entrances, have private yards. It's more spread out, so it really feels like a suburban neighborhood. Think about like the white picket fence, and yes, we're gonna have white picket fence as well. We're very cliche that way. With multifamily apartment, it's highly dense living, common wall, multiple stories, parking maybe outside or downstairs. Every time you forget a grocery or a cell phone, you're not just walking to your garage to go get that item from your car. You have to haul all the way down. Your grocery has to be carried up multiple steps and flights, and it's a whole ordeal, right? Like that's part of the reason why like I personally would rather live in a single family home or a townhome than multifamily.
Yes, and for people who are just themselves, they may be like, "Oh, I can walk a few
But
distance."
you think you have
But
kids.
when you have kids, when you have to take care of the stroller, you have to carry the grocery, you have to like carry another baby. It's like that's a lot.
Yeah. So BTR developments, it's a targeted group, right? So it targets families, young professionals, individuals seeking more space and privacy, along with people who are seeking more long-term rental because they value community and the suburban lifestyle. Well, part of the characteristic that we love about the areas we select to build our BTR is the school system. Obviously, the school system ties in really heavily with families.
Yep.
If they can afford to rent a home, even in a little bit higher range in rental prices, but it's in a great school system, the school district, they're going to stick to that community longer because they've already settled in. They don't want their kids to keep being relocated. Okay. So this part is what Nan started alluding to a little bit, the kind of like the amenity types that comes with BTR. So obviously it comes with the natural, normal things like you have individual yards. You can choose to have garages, attached, detached garage. Ours have attached garage, and I think like with all the conversations we've had, makes so much sense, right?
We totally love it. In case it's raining, in case it's like,
Yeah, and our property is in Dallas, right? So there's hailstorms in Dallas. Who here is from the South or knows of hailstorms or have experienced like golf-sized hailstorms anywhere before? Like that's a big thing, right? Your car gets dinged up. There's nothing you can do. If your car's parked outside, it's done for. Glass can break, everything. So having places like in Dallas specifically, it's very like the weather shifts a lot. So it can be super windy one day and then it can be super hot the next day. The weather can literally drop like 40 degrees. So having the attached garage, us living in Los Angeles may take it for granted, but there are certain areas that is like super important. Other things that typically are included in these kind of communities are like outdoor spaces, parks, playgrounds, walking trails. But for ours specifically, like we dove even deeper.
Yep.
Part of the cool thing about having the ability to build something from scratch is to consult with our third-party property management company that we're going to be working with once we have all the buildings built.
Yep.
And then we can target like what is the latest, greatest things
and
that people want.
And I think that's important because some people who maybe kind of, getting into build to rent, they didn't know that, hey, to actually talk to your potential third party property manager like ahead
Right
of
now.
time. It's not like once you finish building everything
Yeah.
and then they just come in. No, it's like
Start now.
you have to start now because they are in the trenches and they know what's going on.
Yeah, and part of this is also consulting everything from like, hey, in this specific submarket, how many units, how many bedroom, bathrooms should I build? What is the size of the units? What are the amenities to add? For our property, what we've added are a couple cool things. So we have two pickleball courts that we're adding to the property. And other stuff like EV consideration, like EV parking station, anything and everything that you think will attract long-term good paying residents, you just focus on those things. And again, like the cool part is consult with your property management company that you'll be using or source a couple different ones. But the other thing is also you should chop the area and see what are other amenities and also not just what exists, but what are the gaps. Because if you find the gaps, once your property comes online, now you're already, not only is your building newer, but you already have a superior product to what they have. So,
moving on to financial performance.
Yep.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So
something that we always geek out about.
So show us some money signs if you want us to talk a little bit more about the income part, right? Because we talked about income follow assets, and so we need to definitely talk about that part. Okay. So what does that look like? So with BTR projects, the amazing thing is in our underwriting models, and obviously we're not guaranteeing this is for pure educational purposes, we see the potential for multiple income even if you hold the property in the long term. So the cash flow obviously is what's going to be there. It won't be there day one. Obviously there's no buildings.
Yep, but there's just raw land right now.
But the amazing thing is like the first time once you lease up the building completely, you can refi from your construction loan to permanent financing. With that, now you have cash flow coming in and you probably have like cash out refinancing because again, when we borrow to do the construction, they value the property here. But by the time we finish construction, they value it here. By the time we added tenants, if you fill it to like 90, 95% occupancy, now the valuation went from down here all the way up here.
Wow, that just sounds so good.
So therefore, like we've already literally created value at every step of the way. This is, if you ask us, this is truly the highest maximum value add. Right? Yep. It's like dirt. This is how much it costs. This is how much it's worth. You bring it up here. Building is already built, occupied, paying tenants. Now it's up here. Now you can refinance into permanent debt and you can do a massive cash out refinance. That is something that all investors want. I was talking to an investor yesterday and she's like, I love 10% cash flow that I'm getting right now. And I don't want the operators like us to sell it because she's like, why would I want you to sell something that's cash flowing at 10% for me? It's like mailbox money. I close my eyes and it's just spitting out cash, right?
Yep. Like where else can she find it that she can get it, right?
So who wants mailbox money? Let us know. Give us some money signs, heart signs, fire, anything like that.
Fire emoji, right?
Yep. So the great thing is, again, first thing is higher yield because it has longer term tenants, lower vacancy, but also we have a longer runway. We can do multiple refinance cash out, right? So you can do it. You can do refinance run from construction to fully lease up. Then you can do it again, maybe a couple years later, cash out more. Do it again.
That's like growing our own money tree.
That's like the
essentially.
That's the the analogy for this is like growing a seed, right? We always say like you don't reap what you sow, but you reap what you reap after you sow, but you reap way more
than you sow.
And that's like the analogy would be like an apple tree. You plant one seed, you water it. It takes a couple years to grow. That's like the construction part, right? You lease it up. Now you have a beautiful, fully mature apple tree that's not giving you one fruit per year or per life. It's giving you hundreds and hundreds of fruit per year, per season. And guess what? It comes back and it does it again. And that's the magic of infinite return. The moment that you can get multiple refinancing out and you can extract all of the cash value, you're going to be able to actually have infinite return. None of your money is in the deal anymore, but you close your eyes and like money just keeps coming in.
Who wants infinite return? Give us a heart, right? Yep. We need a heart. We need to see that if you want that infinite return.
Okay,
so let's talk about market trends and popularity.
Yeah, so right now, like there's shift in preference. Obviously, people want to have more spacious living due to a lot of the remote working trends and desire for people to have home offices. while there's major companies who are trying to get people to go back to work in the office, I see this as like a more hybrid scenario where some companies, like our friend works for like a major software company, who does like multiple things, but like does stuff with like graphics, let's say, right? You guys probably know who they are. They're like the one player. So from the beginning, his team is all remote. And there's no plan or ever going
That
back to
is
the office.
before COVID
Way
too.
before COVID. And more of those are happening. There's also a preference for the suburban living because people want and crave more outdoor spaces, less density, right? Affordability is also another trend that you see that makes BTR such a hot market because rising home prices makes ownership less accessible, increasing rental demand. And it's that craving for that American dream of a white picket fence, single family home, 2 kids and a dog kind of thing. And like that's what you get without the financial burden. And that's like a win-win for our renters. It's from the investment appeal side, institutional investors are looking for long-term stable returns. They're looking for something that's predictable. Like let's be honest, like multifamily for the past couple of years has been a bit wonky. And so therefore like anything else, when you get to have higher paying tenants, you're going to be able to have like the cost of operating it isn't different. That's why it's so beautiful because multifamily apartments, it's professionally managed by the local team. That translates to BTR community as well, but you're just getting for this, you get more bang for the buck, right? You still probably have the same 3-4 people managing the property, but you have higher paying rents.
Totally.
And also it actually also is more resilient. It's a more resilient class because it's a class of people who stays longer term because now their roots are planted here, their community, their family, their school, kids' schools, all that stuff.
So let's talk about the demographic trend here.
Yeah, again, there's an interesting thing. So there were a prediction a couple years ago that as baby boomers age out, gets into retirement age, there's going to be waves of people selling their homes, what they call the silver tsunami. Now, we talked about this a little bit ago in our previous YouTube video, which you guys can definitely go check out. We'll pin it later. It's
The Kitti Sisters
at the
TV.
Kitti Sisters TV. So the interesting thing is like that silver tsunami never happened. Why? If you notice right now in most markets that are actually desirable, there's really little available homes for sale. The reason for that is the reason there's no inventory is because people aren't selling their homes. The boomers can't afford to move out because high interest rates means like let's say the boomer lived in a 3,000 square foot house and now their kids moved out.
Yep.
And now empty nester typically means they're going to downsize. But right now, for example, in Los Angeles, where median home price for like reasonably nice home is like $1 million. Like it's shocking. But
It's shocking.
imagine that person bought that house in 1980 for $300K,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's already paid off. Now they're entering their retirement years, and they're not like you guys. They didn't plan for generational wealth. They didn't plan for income over assets. Then what happened is they can't afford to leave. If they can't move out, the next generation don't have homes to buy. Like you can't. There's just simply supply and demand. It doesn't exist. So those are the like culminating factors why build to rent is such in high demand.
Yep, guys. So here's the thing. Raise your hand if you're like we're gonna cut to like, hey, raise your hand if you love build to rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the like build to rent simplify, like the real process of getting started. Because
Okay.
I know a lot of people wants to know.
Yeah, now
hey,
that we got you excited about BTR, you may want to know like
how to get this started. Because we get this asked all the time because a lot of people love apartments, but at the same time they hear what we're saying and they're hearing what the expert are saying is that hey,
this is the new thing.
This is a new thing. On top of that, this is how you make money, a lot of money, because you're turning land into an entire neighborhood.
Okay, so really at the beginning is the initial research and planning phase, right? So identifying target markets and demographics. So think of this as like market analysis that you may do for multifamily, but you're going to have to be a little bit, there's more that goes into this. So obviously the first and foremost, you have to find areas with high rental demand. So these are things you should write down, by the way. So high rental demand, high potential for growth. You can do research. There's free tools. There's also paid tools. You can do market research reports. You can search for local real estate data. You can also look at rental property listings and to see like, is there a high demand? You can even go so far as to talk to brokers about like, hey, do you have a lot of rental demands in this area?
Yes, and on top of that, your network of investor, right? Like people who are investor, they tend to know everything, or you even talk to like property management team or anyone.
Yeah, I would focus more on the people who have localized knowledge.
Yep.
So that you can get the most insight. Like this is this is the most important part. If you're buying in the wrong community that there's no demand, then obviously that's not going to be a great thing. Also, understanding the needs and preferences of the renter population in that specific market, and we alluded to that earlier. What we mean is like, what are the amenities? What are the sizzle factors that people want on their property, so that hey, given the choice between property A and property B, I'm going to choose property A, which is your property, any day of the week because it has those factors. The other part is also understanding demographic is so important. And when you're doing anything with like real estate in general, and even really any economic thing, like any business. So you have to understand your preference, the population that's coming to the area. What are they looking for? Do
Yep.
they want 3 bedrooms? Do they want 2 bedrooms? Do they want a home office already built in? All those things are so important. And the great thing is like, because it's BTR, we can
Which is
fix
built to rent.
we can actually set that up, right? It's not a case where like we're constrained by the existing apartment. Like, man, I wish I had those pickleball courts, but well, I don't have one. In
I
our
don't have
case,
room for one.
I don't have room for one. There's no space, right? So those are some of the things that you can definitely understand. Also, you need to study your competitive. You have to do a competitive analysis. Do you have a whole bunch of competitors who's building BTR in the area? And here's the thing: don't be afraid of having people build other BTR communities, because if no one's building anything, it may be a sign that that's not also
That's
in
undesirable
area, right? So make sure that there's a difference between oversupply and supply. Like we have a apartment complex in Arkansas where there's the right amount of supply coming in to actually feed the market's needs while we still maintain a healthy occupancy and rent growth.
Yep.
So don't be afraid of it. It's part of the game. You just have faith in yourself that you're a better builder, you're a better operator, better property manager,
and you are better with team.
Yeah, you have a better team. So
Yep.
so that first part is like analysis of identifying the markets. You may say like, hey, I want to focus on Phoenix. So people always ask us what markets we love investing in. First and foremost, guys, landlord friendly states. Do not
Landlord, business, investor friendly.
do not go into areas. We're gonna Kiraniera. I'm sorry, I screwed that up. But basically, ask how are we gonna secure funding. We're gonna talk about that. Great question. So, we would talk about that as well. So basically, when you go into, like, we live in California, not landlord friendly. It's very difficult environment to run a successful real estate investment business. Go to areas where people actually are honorable to the contract that they sign. If they can't afford to live in your apartment or your BTR project, then they shouldn't have signed that lease. They need to go find something else, right? So we can't take on that burden if they can't afford it. We need to have remedies to remove them if they don't pay rent for successive months.
And like talking from experience, like having to investing in a landlord friendly, business friendly, investor friendly, it actually make us, have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, so much easier. You don't have to worry. Like we used to own our own single family home here in Los Angeles, and it was a terrible environment because every month we were like, man, is this guy going to pay rent? It was just like, imagine every night, oh man, what's next? Is he going to complain about something else? Is he going to pay rent? He never paid rent on time. And then COVID happened.
And on top of that, if it's just single unit, which is like single family, if he doesn't pay, guess who pay?
Yeah.
Right?
So when you do single family rentals, that's not like in a BTR community. Your relationship is 1-to-1, one renter to one property. If they don't pay rent, you end up having to pay that out of pocket.
Look who's paying rent.
But if you do it in an apartment or like a BTR community, you have 100 different families that's paying rent.
Yep.
And so therefore, if
the type
five of them,
the type of property we buy is like 100, 200, 300 units.
So if the BTR or apartment complex, out of the 100 townhomes, if 5 people or 10 people, families don't pay, we have the rest of the property to support the mortgage and operations and other expenses. Where if you don't, like, think about during COVID. That's like, I think one of the key thing that people saw out of COVID is where these multi-dwelling scenarios, BTR or multifamily, as far as supporting paying the mortgage, it was really not a big deal. Where other people, where it was single family home and that specific person I suffered COVID related illness or I got laid off because of COVID, then now you're stuck paying the bill for a long time, which is a horrible experience. Okay, so beyond doing the analysis, the next phase, what you guys need to do, and so write this down, is make sure you research the zoning laws and regulations.
Oh, that's a big, like, that's really
Well,
important.
that's also
Because,
something that would kill the deal.
yep, if you're not in the right zoning, then you can't achieve whatever you want to achieve.
So this is an interesting story. Our friend, like maybe a year and a half ago, came to us and said, like, "Hey, I got this land that I'm buying," and
Yep.
he wanted us to help him run some analysis on it. And the first thing I asked him, like, okay, so I think it was like 7, 8 acres or something. It's not massive, but big enough to build multiple homes. So I asked him, like, "Hey, so what is the zoning?" He said, "Oh, the problem is only zoned for like I think like single family homes," and so it wasn't something where he can like do multiple units on that land. So now that use isn't maximized.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to fit the zoning to the end product that you want to have. And the easiest way to do this, so zoning typically it's like zone for, and some cities don't have zoning. So from what I understand, like most of Houston's don't have zoning. But what zoning
Do
means,
check with your professionals.
so we'll be talking to the research part. So basically what zoning typically includes is like residential zoning, meaning like, hey, you can only build like homes that people are going to reside in. Commercial zoning, meaning like, hey, industrial, warehouse, retail,
Or agriculture zoning.
agricultural zoning, right? So in different cities, municipalities, there's different rules. And that's where you have to make sure that you understand the permissibility of use.
Yep.
Even building heights. You wanted to build a 3-story townhome, but they're like, hey, there's a height restriction or there's a density restriction. In one of our property that we're building, the BTR project, the interesting thing is right now, if you go to the land, you're going to see there's a big pond in the middle. And people will be like, oh, are you building like a pool? Like, it's not a pool.
It's not a pool.
It's a retention pool. It's not a pool in the sense of you're swimming in it. It's a retention pool. So what that pool is for is like, the city said, hey, this was raw land. The rainwater, they calculated how much rainwater would have fallen onto this dirt and would have been accumulated underground. Instead, if we build buildings, they'll have additional runoff. And so in this case, they required us to build a retention pond to the equivalent of what they think a 24-hour worth of water will be. And so every 24 hours, this retention pool will then release into the storm drain. And that helps hold the water. Anyway, so those kind of things, like also some cities are really, really not keen on pushing more new developments. Some don't like apartments, some don't want BTR. Like whatever that community is, you have to do your research ahead of time. Some of the simplest way to do this is if you drive around the neighborhood and you see people build those kind of communities, go in and start talking. Hey, who's the general contractor? Contact them, ask questions.
Most of the time they have a sign.
Yeah.
Oh.
So ask questions, call local architects, local engineers. Have you worked with the city? Even cities that are next door to each other, one may be super pro, hey, development, let's go. The other may be like, hey, I want to hold on to the same old values. And coincidentally, a lot of people like to blame the affordability gap, issues with people not being able to buy homes on developers building out houses and selling for more money. It's not the case. You know what's the case? Zoning laws. If you go look at the history, the reason that a lot of there's lack of home ownership is because there's no zoning. There's a lot of zoning restrictions. People who have nice community don't want multifamily in there, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Researching this, research to local.
That's why for us, research phase is like the most
So
important, right? Because it can make or kill your deal. And that's a little bit different than multifamily.
Yeah, because those are already existing buildings. So that research has been done. So you need to definitely do that. Okay. Next part is feasibility studies. I'm not going to bore you, but essentially for us, we always hire third party to verify our data.
Yep.
We go out, do market research, zoning, all those stuff. But at the same time, we want people who have deep level of research and data to come in and and say like, hey, your assumptions are correct. Hey, should there be 3 bedrooms, 2 bathroom in this area? What are the demand factor? What are the rent looks like? What amenities we should have? Everything that we've already done our ground research on. Now we want a third party professional team to come in and verify that data.
Yep. This is not because like Palm and Nan just like
made it up.
Right? Like this is like the third party management team who said, hey,
not management team, but feasibility
team who just come and say, hey, this is what is needed.
And this is all they do. There's professional companies who you can pay. It was pretty hefty, like $40K or something like that, where they can do like independent study on exactly what the property in this area needs. And so the cost analysis, you do that. Now here's one thing, like when you underwrite, right? When you
For the build to rent development.
when you're doing the build to rent development and you're analyzing like, hey, should I build in this area? It's very, very different than multifamily purchases when it's already built out already.
As you can imagine.
The reason for that is like there's some complexity with understanding like construction horizon, the use of funds, different type of loan mechanism that you have to use. So you have to know what you're doing. Contingencies are different. Now we have to build in contingency for construction, for a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So labor costs, all those things. So if you do construction, anyone who's even done single family flips knows that you have to have a hefty, especially in today's kind of environment, you have to have a hefty contingency. And in any scenario, that is something that doesn't change. Revenue projections are also different because when we start, we don't have revenue. We're building the buildings, right? And so
it's raw land.
So as we're leasing up, like Nan said at the beginning, for us, while it's more work on the paperwork side, we always get each individual building or townhome or single family home on the BTR individually deeded. This is a cool factor.
What does that mean?
So that means that once that building gets its certificate of occupancy from the city, we can lease up that unit. We don't have to wait for the entire complex, like entire development community. Maybe like it's 100, 200 plus community. Instead of waiting for 200 townhomes to be completed and given the CO certificate of occupancy, we can lease out each individual unit.
Yes, and if some people who are working with people who are inexperienced, a lot of time they don't do that because they don't know. This is something that we and our team have known.
I mean, ask us how we know, right? So it's like because we've gone through it, and so this is something that's very important.
When we know it, this is desirable.
So the underwriting is different. We're not having cash flow day one, but then we will have cash flow as the property starts leasing up. The other part that you have to work with your property management team really closely is, hey, what is the leasing going to look like? How many units? Because cost is different for occupied units versus unoccupied units. So you're going to ramp up your income, but your cost is also going to go up slightly to the point where it equalizes, right? The other part of the analysis, which is very important, is construction costs, material, labor costs, other things that include what they call, so there's hard costs, which is construction. There's soft costs, which are like architectural, engineering, permits, legal fees, etc. Again, like,
okay. Oh, I know we talk a lot.
So hopefully this is fun. Hopefully you guys, you're enjoying this. If you now like think that BTR is the thing, put in BTR. Let us know because like we're so excited about this topic and we can talk about it for hours. Profitability, all those things, you run your analysis. Those are the same, right? Most investors are looking for cash flow. They're looking for IRR, which is internal rate of return. They're looking for overall return, how long the property you're going to hold it for, all those things, right?
So let's talk about the risks here, Palm.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people is like, okay, guys, Kitti Sister, this is all great, but I want to know the risks. Like, how can they assess those risks?
Yeah, so part of the risk in any market condition is like fluctuation in rental demand and market conditions. So you have to understand the local area really well and what new supplies are coming in. More importantly, are there enough population coming in to support the new construction project? And that's why having like feasibility studies and understanding just the local market is so important. You also have construction delay risks. So construction delays, cost overrun, quality issue, those are all things that you have to work hand in hand with. The key here is like for us, we are the GC on our own property. So we have very, very tight control over construction risks. Not 100%, obviously, there can always be things out of our control, but we can make sure that we're not going to go do another project at the same time that overextends us, right? So if you can partner up with a general contractor who's experienced in multi-unit building, okay, so there's a difference between a contractor who helped you build your flip versus a person who can actually handle multiple units at the same time. It's a much bigger project, right? Regulatory changes, if there's some sort of impending law that may change zoning requirement, height requirement, all those things, you have to research those ahead of time. And that's where you work closely with the city. If you work with the city where they already they're embracing this kind of stuff, they're going to be more open to give you insights on how to get that done. Mitigating strategies, guys. So yeah, those are some of the risk factor. Again, market, construction, regulatory, right? Diversifying, spreading risk to multiple properties. Obviously, having the proper insurance in place goes without saying. Contingency plan, develop a contingency plan for delays, budget overrun, market downturn. Like, what are those things going to look like? Then for us, we hired a bookkeeping team specifically to target, like, hey, this is our model monthly, right? Cost expense per month during construction phase, and we're making sure that what we're paying out is equivalent to what we're expecting. Right now, thank goodness, our project is running below budget, which yeah, not promised.
It's really hard for people who are inexperienced to do this because a lot of time they know the what, but to actually do it and to actually get it on time within a time frame and within a budget is important. And that's the key, because when you raise money from your investor, they're gonna want to see what you have been doing, the business plan execution. On top of that, are you on track to make them a lot of money?
Yeah,
right.
Most important.
So, okay, guys, this is the most important thing, and I know we got people to ask us here is, how do you fund your build to rent development, right? Because as you guys know, you can have a great deal. You can have a deal that is so conservative in underwriting. You can buy a piece of land that is super, super cheap. But if you don't have the money to actually make it real, like turn it into reality, you have no business. Like, you have no business.
Yeah.
Essentially. So, Palm, what's the difference between what's the traditional financing here?
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. When we do BTR,
Which is built to rent.
There's different ways. There's different entry points to start funding options, right? When you buy the land, sometimes people finance that, right? So if you're financing the land, then you need to start raising money from day one. If you are paying cash, or you have investors who you already brought in from day one to buy the land, you may buy it free and clear. For us, we have it free and clear. So that part is bypassed. Some people may need to get funding for that, may borrow money for that.
So some people may need to go out and raise the money from their investor to buy land. But for us, we didn't need to go that process because we have the money. So we actually went out and buy land and get it entitled, and it saved our investor like 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is actually, there's two parts to the actual construction development, right? So the first one is horizontal, like we talked about, anything underground. And the next part is vertical, everything above ground. Just think of the actual building construction. You can choose to go finance both the horizontal and the construction, which means you'll have to raise more money, right? So you're raising money from an investor and you're borrowing. So how it normally works for us is we borrow money, and then we also raise the difference. So whatever we can borrow for the construction portion, then we raise the difference, right? So that's where you guys are asking, like, how do you fund these projects? Part of it is borrowing money. The second part is raising money from investors. We chose to raise 100% equity for the horizontal, so we didn't finance it.
Yep. Which is really hard for many people because they couldn't
finish the raise.
They don't have the skill set, or they don't know the strategy and have that system to raise the capital.
Yeah. So the benefit of doing it that way, and not everyone does it this way, is you can do this only when you're able to raise enough money. And the benefit of doing it this way is you control the timeline. Not that we want to delay things, but there's no pressure. In today's high interest rate environment, the reason that it's so comfortable for us is we don't have to push the pace more than what we've targeted, because we know we don't have the bank on our back. We don't have someone's like, hey, when are you going to finish? Or like have to worry about, hey, here's my draw, right? Draw meaning like they reimburse us for construction costs that we paid up front. Right now, it's us. We have the money in the bank. We have a bill. Basically, every month we do like a drawdown. Like, okay, this is how much everything's due. We pay the contractor. We pay all the costs for materials, all that stuff. Okay, so for us, we fund our horizontal based on the equity we raise, right?
Yep.
So that may be something you want to do. If you can, great. Then the last part is the construction, the vertical construction part. That is where we are going to do a construction loan. Again, the construction loan will fund like a majority of it, and a little bit of it is the money we've already raised, right? So it comes in like big piece is the institutional lender, and a little piece of it is the investor's money that's coming in. The reason we like that is it's a shorter time frame. It's a win-win. The lender, they want us to start using their money immediately, like call the draws, right? So basically, almost within the first month after closing the loan, we will start construction on the building up
Yep.
vertically. So therefore, they want that to happen. It makes it so that we actually borrow money for a shorter period of time, and
Which is good for our investor because we're not just borrowing like days, like years and days ahead.
like the biggest issue with typical, like the risk factor we said earlier, the biggest issue typically is overrun of budget or delays.
Yep.
And in the case, well, the way we're doing it, it reduces the chances of delay and overruns because we've already raised all the money, and the lender also appreciates that because right now when they lend to us, again, when we talked about earlier, we're not paying, the valuation isn't raw dirt
Anymore.
it's not raw dirt. It's not even entitlement.
Mm-mm.
It's not even partial horizontal. It's full horizontal development. So that value increase makes the bank feel more comfortable lending us the money. Now, the other part that's different is you have to be able to communicate with your investors, right? Because traditional financing with BTR is slightly different than apartments that are already constructed. You have to borrow first for a construction loan in any part, right? It can be part one, buying the raw land, part two, horizontal, or going in like us with part three of the development, only the vertical part. But you have to borrow some money for construction, and construction loans are shorter time frame. They're not like fixed debt that's holding forever. They're only for you to do the construction part. Then you have to raise the money. Now, the difference between raising money for single family or for BTR and multifamily is we're not cash flowing day one. So how do you communicate that if your investors are
How do you
used to?
get the investor to actually wire you hundreds and millions of dollars? Because when we're talking about raising money, we didn't just raise like a million or two. We actually raised like substantial amount, like 8-figure, right? Like
Not for this project alone, but collectively. So basically, you have to prioritize also that investors, they have to understand like, hey, these aren't short-term projects. These are longer-term projects, right? Legacy projects. So you have to understand how to communicate that with investors. And that is, it may sound simple, but that is one of the biggest thing, right? So raising money for BTR projects means that you have to be able to articulate specific thesis that you have in such a way that the investor feels compelled to wire you money because they understand exactly what they're getting to, and they're so excited about the opportunity of getting this once in a lifetime project. So it's very crucial for you guys to educate your limited partners or your investors to make sure that if they're not familiar with BTR projects, that they understand the risk and rewards, and that like you also have a pool of people who are interested in this specific topic.
yep, the type of people who don't need like cash flow here and there, right? They're the people who actually, want to create this generational wealth. So by saying that, guys, if you're ready to secure your financial future and create a lasting legacy through this unique opportunity of built to rent development, but you're wondering how to fund your project, right? Remember, guys, even the best deal is just a dream without the necessary funding. Make sure to join our upcoming 5 days Raise More Money challenge. In this challenge, you're going to learn how to consistently and effectively raise more money and build your network of investor who would love to, invest alongside you. So go sign up simply by going to raisemoremoneychallenge.com. That is raisemoremoneychallenge.com. Man,
That was so fun.
right? Again, like we hear time and time, you have a deal, but if you don't have money, that's it. You don't have a deal.
Yeah, so basically if you can't, especially in today's environment, if you can't compel and find the type of people who actually want to invest with you, remember raising money isn't about begging, borrowing, or like twisting someone's arm to come and invest with you. It's about actually getting them to understand that this is what they wanted and it makes sense for both of you, right? So it's a win-win scenario. So on the screen we have the QR code and also the URL. So it's raisemoremoneychallenge.com, raisemoremoneychallenge.com. We're going to break down all the stuff we talked about in more granular detail so that you can actually follow through this step by step. The idea here is, like the name says, raise more money, meaning that whatever you can raise today, you get through this challenge, you'll be able to understand how to raise more money. And if you guys want to get more information, you can email us or you can DM us on social. You can DM us OPM. If you DM us OPM, you'll get some information as well.
Yep, guys, raisemoremoneychallenge.com is happening faster than you could think of.
Ciao.